The footage you will have seen before this is, well, if you read the information being displayed, I think you could take a guess. But just to go over quickly. Recently, my original nudist video with me being naked, uncensored, non-sexually on the channel, when I was on a hill in the rural countryside of southern Quebec. For a period of about 6 hours or so, it was removed from YouTube, and I got a violation notice sent to me, claiming that I had violated the sexual gratification content policy, which I had not. I already don't agree with it anyway, in general, at all, but either way, I had not. But thankfully, I was able to resolve that issue with YouTube. I sent an appeal for that video, and I sent them a message claiming that the takedown was completely unjustified, out of nowhere, as that video has been up for at least 5 months, nearly 6. And so within a day of having the video taken down, it was just like that, reinstated again, completely visible. And everything seemed fine. But then a day later, I get another violation notification from YouTube for a recent video of mine that contained non-sexual nudity, uncensored. That being my second part of dispelling destructive social myths that far too many people still believe. Once again claiming that I had violated the sexual gratification content guidelines. Once again, I did not. And I tried sending another appeal to YouTube for that. And the appeal was denied. I also sent them a message, much like the first time. Because, to also mention, in the first message I had sent to, I believe it went to whatever human beings are on YouTube's guidelines moderating team. In the original message I had sent, 1, this was for educational purposes, this video. 2, this is one of now currently 3 other videos on my channel where I have appeared nude, uncensored, non-sexually. And then, as I said, after that message was sent, well, the video was visible again to the public. But once this second takedown happened, along with trying to sign the appeal, I sent them a much more aggravated and stern message. Because I know what you're trying to do, YouTube. I sent, and I'm paraphrasing here, YouTube moderating team. This is the second unjustified takedown of one of my videos containing non-sexual nudity. The content here was for the purposes of education and was not presented in any sort of sexually gratifying manner. This is also the second time now that a video of mine with said non-sexual nudity has been taken down in that regard. Not any other videos that in some way have more themes of sexuality or displays of eroticism in them in relation to videos I've done where I've gone inside strip clubs and things of the sort, even with the censoring. So I said to them, if you remove another one of my videos containing non-sexual nudity, one of the other two now that haven't been removed, I will know that you are purposefully targeting my channel in order to get me to stop uploading. Now, as I said, the appeal was denied, and as of right now, there's no option for me to reapply an attempt at appealing the violation. So, as of right now, the second part of me dispelling social myths, that video is still unavailable as of current. I hope relatively soon that YouTube reinstates it. That would be very, very nice. But along with that video being removed and me getting a violation, I got a warning put on my channel for the potentiality of a strike to come against it if I was to violate either the same guideline or just any other guideline, I guess, within 90 days of having received the initial violation. Well, then I would get a strike against my channel. And I believe if that were to happen with one strike, I either would not be able to post videos for a certain amount of time, or any content on my channel, or I'd just have the uploading ability terminated indefinitely, unless I was to somehow resolve that issue with YouTube or a representative of YouTube directly. And interestingly enough, and I know this isn't a coincidence, I bothered to go and check the community tab on my channel here. I had done a video when I was in Montreal, Quebec, about, as far as I'm concerned, the completely unethical, authoritarian nature of YouTube and Pornhub, MindGeek, as I had been having issues in regards to certain procedures with both platforms, and I was royally infuriated. And in that video I mentioned how I was stripped of the ability to post to the community tab that I had received availability for, the option to do so once I had passed a certain amount of subscribers. I forget which amount when I noticed. And after now 3.5 to 4 months since that initial removal of the ability to post there happened. After these 2 videos were removed, and then the initial nudity video went back up, and now the second part of Dispelling Social Myths was taken down, I now, at least as far as I can tell, have regained the ability to post to the community tab. Yeah. I have the ability to now, it seems. I haven't made any posts to it yet. But, yeah. Though, interestingly enough, I still can't post external URL links in the descriptions of my videos, and I also still can't pin comments. So they just gave me one of those options back, I guess. As a little incentive. Well, not taken YouTube. So, unfortunately for now, and I'll touch on this again a bit later in the video. Unfortunately for now, the second part of Dispelling Social Myths, that video I made not too long ago, is, well, currently non-visible. It's unavailable. So, that sucks. But thankfully, I have not received any more notices from YouTube in the last few days regarding any issues in accordance with their policies. So, that's a plus, I guess. So I just wanted to state that. But now, on to the actual bulk of the video. It has been a very interesting and very somber last couple of weeks for me. I've been in a constant mental state of it's the best way I could describe it. Internal peace and restlessness at the same time. I know that's contradicting. But you will have read the title of the video, so I guess I'll just get right into explaining it. And then whatever comes out of my mouth from there, well, it's what I say. For almost my entire time being here in the city of Leviz, I have come to a very crucial realization for both myself and for the world around me. One of them, well, one of the things that, one of these understandings that specifically pertains to me, I don't like, and I shouldn't like, but I've accepted it. The other that pertains to my interpersonal life to some degree or another, that is affected by the external world, and but more so the external world overall, that is a very positive thing in essence, I'll say. And it's not like this is some groundbreaking, world-shattering epiphany that other people have never come to before. No, other people have realized this. But sadly, they are the very few in the world. Like me, they're not heard at this point in time, and might never be for their lives, for the duration of their lifetime. Let's first address the part of the cognitive realization that pertains to myself, more so. I have realized that in regards to my theoretical and implementation work, in all the fields of research that I've been working in, that I have proposed very clearly groundbreaking ideas for, and everything I've tried to do with them up until this point, online and in my immediate social circles, have come to realize and accept that my work is not going to most likely become known in any sort of majorly impactful sense overall in the various sciences or to the broader world around me, just in terms of societal settings and systems as a whole. They most likely aren't going to have any sort of extensively noticeable impact that would cause major benefit for myself and for other people to occur sociologically. Until either I am a elderly person, till I'm a very old man, or until after I'm dead. After I've done what work I can do, written what I have, talked about what I felt I need to talk about, and then have passed away. And only then, maybe some of the work may start to, for whatever reason that I'm more uncertain of right now than before. Well, really, I guess you could really never, I was never really certain as to why this phenomenon keeps happening historically. Till something after my death, I guess, propels people to suddenly take interest in my work. Other than, well, instead of when I was alive and breathing. And in that, I have to know that whatever impact I have with them in my life, I'll have to look for in my immediate surroundings. And to do that, I have to stop being shy about sharing my ideas and voicing what I truly feel with people who are immediately around me. And make no mistake, in the last little while, I have gotten far better at doing that than ever before in my young life. The sad truth of the matter is that people are so traumatized and indoctrinated into stupidity that any amount of actual, provably new ideas, or at the very least newer than things that have been proposed before in whatever field of study, realm of social functioning it may be, people are so conditioned into really thinking that this is just the way that things operate, that they'll convince themselves that new ideas have to come through the old ones. They have to come through the old systems that are set up. Otherwise, they're invalid. It's the classic idea that there has to be regulation in order for a society to function nominally. That you need to have a rigorous, set, unchangeable foundation in order for an idea that could completely shatter that foundation and replace it with a new one to be valid. And they become so accustomed to a certain period in time, period of history for whatever given civilization they live in, just being the norm. That any new ideas are just sort of, they're just tickled. They're just tickled for entertainment. That's it. They just entertain the ideas, but they don't really do anything with them. They don't incorporate them into actual social functioning. Their moral stances. It's funny to think, most of those who could be considered intellectuals, prominent, or if not provably intelligent, prominent historical figures, at least in theoretical works, ones that are readily taught in the manipulation systems that are the world educational systems. Those who are taught as being highly intellectual individuals or highly influential in their career fields, most of the time they don't talk about the fact, at least in pedagogy, and also anyone who is studying in the fields just reads the textbooks and doesn't bother to think about them. Most people really don't bother to actually research the history of these people and understand the fact that most of them only got into the educational systems after pushing for years to have their voices heard. In their time, no one acknowledged their work. No one. They were looked at as ludicrous. It took most of these individuals that are taught, especially in the Western educational systems, so long to actually fight for their causes to be heard. For any work that they did to get anywhere, to any form of major recognition, and then eventually being implemented into educational systems. But that gets lost to people's memories throughout history because of the co-option of these figures for the further educational indoctrination in relation to my my sociological theory of purposely stupefied systemic education for elitist authority. They just present half-truths about these individuals, without bothering to mention the fact that during their time, when these individuals were alive, no one cared. No one paid any mind to their work, most of them. There are those who did have prominence in their time to some degree, but overall, I'd say most influential figures who are taught about in academia in the modern day, in their time when they were alive, no one paid any mind. And yet people will not realize that same thing for the modern day, like with someone such as myself or anyone else in my position. They really don't bother to. And I tried, ever since leaving Ottawa, for so long. It feels long to me. I know in the grand scheme of things, how long a human can live to. It's not a long time. Well, in my perception of time, it feels like it. I've tried in what ways I can to get more word out about them, about my work. And it's not out of some attempt at just histrionic, egocentric popularity gain. It's because I feel that this information that I've discovered could save lives. Millions. No, it's not that I feel, I know it can. I know it. I know, and yes, this is an assertion of some amount of narcissistic trait. Everyone has them. This does not mean that I can't be wrong. I am wrong 24/7. And this does not mean that if there was new information to come about that could debunk my theories, well, then there you go. My theories would be debunked, and I would have been wrong. That's completely possible. But as I've said 1,000 times before, as far as I'm concerned, up until this point, nothing has debunked almost all of my theories. Everything I have experienced and seen has, in actuality, only just further and further reaffirmed them. Extensively. I know that I very clearly have discovered the essence of human psychobiological nature itself. In that regard, human nature itself. I have. Anyone who has even the shrivelest bit of intelligence, to a high extent, would look at my diagrams and I think they'd agree, at the very least, that I'm onto something. And on top of that, what's even, because of these discoveries, and my attempts at sharing them, what's even more disheartening is the fact that people really do overall, at least in online form, just don't care to listen. I've been told by multiple people, and I've even, mainly in interpersonal conversations, but I have had, you can find them in the comment sections on my channel, I've had a handful of comments telling me that I should make my videos shorter, more digestible, or you need to chop this out, or you need to shorten the information so that more people will watch, because nobody's going to watch a 3-hour video. No, I don't. You know why? One, I will not just conform to what everyone is doing on the platform so that more people will just click on the video, so that it's more appealing for consumption, to drown yourselves in entertainment. Two, The information I'm sharing cannot be explained in a 5-minute fucking video. It can't. If you actually believe that you can go over the intricacies and complexities of the human psyche, the foundations of how sociological systems are set up, their mass influence historically, the dissection of philosophical concepts in ontology, phenomenology, metaphysics, axiology, etc., in the span of 10 to 15 minutes, and actually address in-depth, to the most in-depth that the ideas can go, address them to their fullest extent, you're an idiot. Or you're, at the least, you are very, very, very naive. You're a very naive person. The only reason most people want short and digestible content is A, so that they can quickly just absolve their media addictions, to distract them from the horrors of their lives. And so that they could have something to keep going back to keep themselves functioning, to keep them slogging through the endless days of labor and the isolating loneliness, the conscious, provably fixable loneliness that they endure every day. It's getting rather cold. I think I'm going to have to continue this inside. I think this little room will work well enough. So, I know that what I've outlined is truthful. But this now begs the question, if I know that most likely my work won't catch on in some fashion, for a very, very long time. What is the point to keep going in life? If this beneficial information might very well not reach the desired amount of people in my lifetime, well, what's the point to even bother working on it? Well, that comes to the other half of the epiphany that I've had. That being, when I left Toronto, now nearly 2 years ago, been a year and a half by this point, I was in the midst of, and had clearly been going through, an existential crisis and a morality crisis since the earlier years of my teenage era. And at the time, I didn't know whether human beings were really naturally empathic. With many things that I had seen, how hypocritical people are on a daily basis, the shortcomings that they don't notice, or they do notice, but they pay no real mind to. All the overconfident, overly narcissistic morons that I was surrounded by. At so many different points. And what I would constantly see online, not in the sense of, oh, social media, it's deteriorating your psychological health because of all the negativity and all the perfectionism. Not, well, in essence that, but not in the sense that, not in the sentiment that most people mean it to be. As if the reason people behave like that on social media is a byproduct of social media in and of itself. No. I began to somewhat believe, though I didn't concretely say I believed it because I wanted to find proof whether or not it was truthful, whether human beings were truly psychopathic in nature, unempathetic, uncompassionate, and solely externally destructive for selfish gain. I was in a state of uncertainty. When I got to Ottawa and I began realizing these ideas of mine, putting them into word, I realized that wasn't true at all. Human beings are naturally empathic and sympathetic, despite what the moronic misanthropists and pessimists and cynics of the world will say, who have been emotionally beaten and bruised to a point where they just think it must be true. Fuck looking at human history. It must be true because of everything I've just experienced. It must be true that change can't happen. Because why hasn't it happened to me? And then once I realized that human beings are naturally compassionate and work collectively to gratify internal selfishness, yes, but nonetheless work collectively in a beneficial sense. To achieve it. My existential and morality crisis took on a different form. Now, at that point, leaving Ottawa going into Gatineau, Quebec, I wanted to see if the world, on a major scale, if it was even possible for us to get back to a point of collective prosperity. If collectivism, communitarianism, socialism and communism in leftist ideals could, to some degree, come back as we lived in pseudo forms of said certain ideologies long, long ago, overall, in various different civilizations across the globe. And even now, it doesn't even matter to me whether that was to come true or not. I know that won't happen in my lifetime if it is still even possible. I just wanted to know if that possibility was still there. If the world was not past a point of no return in terms of psychosociological trauma. The mass spread of so many mental disorders, personality disorders, behavioral disorders, all of which not inherently, as far as I'm concerned, it would be ableist to think so, not inherently will cause disrupt to moral stances, but the sad reality is, do disrupt morality, provably beneficial ethical understandings in individuals who suffer from them. Well, I've come to realize that even if that possibility doesn't exist anymore, collectivism, social compassion, still exists in the smaller forms. The only reason that I'm even sitting here in this room, in this building, in the Viz, Quebec, Canada, is because of the aid of other human beings who willingly chose to help me, for whatever reasons they may have done so, whether out of compassion or in relation to morally corrupt individuals with certain disorders, say maybe out of covert narcissism, covert NPD, covert histrionic personality disorder. Either way, I'm sitting here now because I put my trust in people. Even when I was slightly afraid. I let people help me. And they offered to help me. Even at points as well, when I didn't even ask. Now, I think morally they should have. But even so, something compelled them to try and help, even without my consent. It's so clear to me that my very existence disproves the philosophies of misanthropy and cynicism. It's actually pretty ironic. I hated Diogenes as a person, researching the Greek philosopher's life, especially in regards to my theory of subconscious optimism. Diogenes, as far as I'm concerned, was an egocentric hedonist who had no time really for anyone but himself, just to gratify solely his own self-centered needs. Yeah, he was unconformist. He was contrarian. But he was really just purposely contrarian as far as I'm concerned. But it's ironic. My lifestyle now and his, it's practically the same. He was a vagabond. I'm a vagabond nomad. We both committed to living outside as much as we could. I have seen the kindness of people. Even with their own mistrust somewhat in me, them push past it and help as it was needed. And with how many encounters I've had as such, realized even if we never get back to a time of provably higher global prosperity, at least for certain regions of the world and different demographics and different groups, different colonies, different tribes, different cultures. That prosperity still exists in the smaller forms. And people, despite what reactionaries think, it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It may be under suppression, but it's not going to go extinct. We really look at it, almost no prior initial culture, then forming an ideology, and then to a neoculture, well, it hasn't died off. It's still here. Doesn't matter which ethnic, but you can point to any ethnic background, any sexuality, any ideologic culture. Remnants of it, even with the mass genocides, cultural genocides, fragments of it are still here. Now, that doesn't at all morally condone the genocide. It's horrendous. It's atrocious. It's provably immoral. But to some degree, the cultures survived it. Even with, say, the element of what will be considered languages that are going extinct. Well, they're not extinct because even if there aren't as many speakers of them, they have either formed into modified dialects because of colonialization of different regions of the world, or at the very least, the teachings about what the language was still remain. They're still here. They're not dead. People on all sides of the political spectrum, more so right wing. But, well, no, I take that back. In terms of the oppression, more so the right wing, but in terms of far leftism, the mass reactionary outpours, just the same. Same with centrists. Is all dehumanizing reactions to the opposing side why they do what they do with unproductive methods? Really unbenefiting methods. I don't even want to hear the argument that people have drummed up that, oh, it's better nowadays than it was in the past. No, it isn't. You are delusional in half if you actually think so. If you actually believe that Black North American culture improved, I'm going to throw a few examples here. If you actually believe that Black culture in North America and community structure improved since the civil rights movement of the 1960s, go take a walk in Compton, LA. Go take a walk in Camden, New Jersey. Go take a walk through Denzing or Cedarbrae area in Scarborough, Toronto, or anywhere really in eastern North York. Go walk in the northeastern end of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Go take a walk through southern Guadalajara or various suburbs of Mexico City or Guatemala City, particularly, I guess, maybe the West End. Go do that, and in numerous other cities around the world. Go to the rougher areas and tell me that it's getting better. Go to the rural religious communities, especially throughout Central and Eastern Europe, that are severely homosexist, homophobic, and alienating and oppressive towards LGBTQ plus culture and transgenderism. Go see the heinous remarks, or listen to the heinous remarks that are made of condemnation of natural human sexuality that is non-problematic in essence. Go just take a look around you at all across the world how, male dominant is, how cis male dominant is, how cis women are viewed as basically just, no, it's cliche to say, but it's true, objects of just appeal for male gratification. Not just in sexual nature, in terms of conforming to more gender persona, similar to that of masculinity. Seeing femininity or anything within a culture that's associated to being more feminine as something that's weak. And another tie into that, go look at the numerous amounts of internet podcasts and subreddits and forums that are full of insulistic, misogynistic locker room talk. Go look at the amount of, well, in terms of internalized misogyny and histrionic personality disorder, women who would be referred to as pick-me girls in the modern sense. Go look at how extensive that is online and in, well, corporate positions all across the world. Office positions. The tycoon girl boss. Listen to how so much of the emo and alternative rock community idolizes, romanticizes psychological illness. A feeling of it, well, an attempt at attention seeking and feeling as if it's some badge of honor. In reality, as far as I'm concerned, the entire genre was born out of dispelling the destructive societal traumatizers that cause such illnesses to be birthed in the first place. And just take a look at the fact that left, right, center, no one understands psychological health or physiological health for shit. The idea that it's becoming more prevalent in modern day, no, it's not. This is like a fraction of genuine, actual knowledge into psychology that is known in the modern sense, sadly only because of amounts of performative activism. Because, as I've said a million times before, as a result of neoliberal fascism, pandering to artistic demographics and those with psychological illness who are and aren't morally corrupt. So in all that, even though I know that collectivism, at the very least pseudo-collectivism, still flourishes to one extent or another, that begs the question, another one. Well, even if in regards to what is the point of continuing on in life, well, even with that amount of collective human engagement. If it could only, or if it only really, for myself I'm speaking right now, but this applies to anyone in my position. If I believe now that it can, for trying to aid and change, if I believe that my work is most likely not going to enter any real public discourse anytime soon that I would like it to, or until after I'm dead. Again, what's the point? I have always, for the longest time, obviously not always, but figure of speech, I have for the longest time tried so desperately to remain provably morally competent and morally consistent. I have tried to hold affirmative moral stances and critically think for myself and assess what would be more beneficial or more detrimental to do. And recently as well, a few months ago now, I announced that I have newfound ideologies. I'm an anarcho-communist, used to be a libertarian communist, but there are flaws in, I think, leftist libertarianism now. Very big flaws. I don't think it's viable, and in essence still does condone actually some form of authoritarian rhetoric. Anarcho-communist, social anarchist, and situationalist. Anarcho-situationalist and an ethical situationalist. And I've found ever since reorienting my thought process and ideologies and reassessing my ethical values, whenever since coming to the realization of believing in situationalism, whenever I've gotten in conversations with people, brief points that I have about ethical situationalism, everyone seems to really have this uncomfortability with it. Oh, I'm not for situational ethics. You can't say that something is good for this scenario and then better for that scenario. That's basically just moral relativism, which I hate. Well, no, it's not at all. It's very clear to me that many people have a very screwy idea of what situationalism is. Ethical situationalism does not mean that you just, willy-nilly decide to do whatever the hell you want well, I guess I'm going to do this for this thing because it seems better for that, or it's better for me to do that. And then maybe I'll do something different over here or whatever. This idea of, oh, I'll just go with the flow type ethics. That's not what situationalism is at all. Situationalism, ethical situationalism, from my own research that it's outlined, I don't know the exact philosophers that outlined it, but it had become prominent it was prominent it's been prominent both amongst moralist and anti-moralist works, but it's obviously not as near extensively focused on in much of mainstream academia in terms of philosophy. It states that you try as hard as you can to hold objective moral values, and you try as much as you possibly can to keep consistent with what you enact, what you choose to do, how you choose to treat others, what materials you choose to use, things that you choose to engage with. You try as much as you possibly can with what you're given to remain consistent and hold objective ethical values that you orient yourself towards. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, if you're met with an obstacle in your social settings, where you have to make a very hard choice, where you basically have no other option, to where you're backed into betraying whatever semblance or some semblance of the consistent morality that you've held, well, then at that moment, you're going to have to reassess your moral stances and decide whether or not you follow with the consistent morality you've held for the most part and fail, or in that moment you assess the situation and you determine what is ethically right to do then and there. And thus, as far as I see it, admitting that you were wrong, it is the ultimate giving up of narcissism, as far as I'm concerned. If I ever am able to fully write out and then release my books, I'll talk about this in my nonfiction works. Situationalism has had a long-standing relationship with collectivism and anarchism, completely. Long-standing historical relationship. And no, it is not moral relativism. You know why? Because, in a contradicting sense, I am asserting an affirmative moral stance. I believe that it is morally justifiable to condone assessing situational events whilst trying to hold a concrete moral stance on how you would deal with it. But ultimately, if it goes awry and your efforts don't work, you changing your moral stances to fit with the situation. Most people just live in, well, I guess I would call it unethical situationalism, but they live in some form of it. point being, in that regard, you can say that you will do this for this given situation all you damn well want. And I think you should, and you can try to, and you absolutely should try to do whatever in your eyes you feel, if you're holding to your moral stances. Even if they're provably detrimental, I would encourage you to think for yourself and go with what you deem to be right. Well, you should try to enact that. But the ultimate reality is, well, reality is unpredictable. You ultimately will not know what you will do. This is not specific to one demographic, and no, this is me speaking on behalf of all human demographics. It's not singular to a set culture, racial background in that regard as well. Sexual expression, gender expression, religious background, class status financially. You cannot ultimately know concretely what you will do. Even if what you do falls in line with the moral stances you try to concretely hold. Even if what ends up happening falls in line with your set moral values, it's not going to go how you envision it. At all. So, back to what the point of carrying on is. Well, because, as far as I'm concerned, benefit to some degree and living a healthy lifestyle, free of some amount potential more pain, or the constant pain and trauma of the world around us now, is possible to some degree. And it's not found by just being complacent with the moral corruption that we're surrounded by. I said I was accepting of the fact that my work most likely will not become known for a long time. I'm accepting of that. I'm accepting of the way the world is. I'm not complacent with it. There's a difference between acceptance and being complacent. Being complacent is just saying, fuck it, I give up. And abiding by the socially constructed rules, socioculturally, governmentally, legal institution enforcement, economic oppression and policy enforcement, religious dictation. It's just throwing up your hands and saying, I quit. In the sense of I feel like I can't do anything anymore, or that it all wasn't worth it. So just become one of them. One of the indoctrinated, traumatized, intellectually inept masses. Just become like them. Because I'm so tired of being emotionally alone. Acceptance is realizing that all of that is true. But as far as I'm concerned, still trying to go against it. And that's what I am doing, as much as I can, and what I will do until my dying days. You know, for as much as the edgelord right-wingers of the internet like to claim that the entirety of leftist ideology is just prissy, pampered, crybabies that sit in their dark basement and type away on Twitter, which I think accurately, they have very little self-awareness, because I think that accurately describes most of internet right-wingers. Not, well, it also describes, yes, far leftists in regards to social media obsession, but you get my point. Well, for those of you who claim that we're just as hypocritical as you, that in reality, in essence, because of the contradictions of life, and the fact that nobody has really bothered to outline them as extensively, other than certain people, that we're in essence doing the same thing that they are in terms of far leftist reactionary rhetorics, and as far as I'm concerned as well, falling leftist and center leftist ideals. Well, you can't claim that for me or someone like me. I don't need to give any further explanation other than submit to you my video content if you ever bother to give a damn to watch them. I have come so far. I have seen so much. More than any of you performative leftists will ever, well, in the state you are right now with being performative, who in that regard you're actually right-wing. You're just putting on a facade to get laid. Well, if you keep that mentality, I have seen more than you ever will see. I have done so many things on camera that I've shown here in my vlog videos, my exploration videos, my commentary videos since leaving Toronto. And I've done even more shit off camera. There's so much stuff that I can't even, I want to do a part 2 to the video I made in Laval, Quebec, for my 1-year anniversary of leaving Toronto. Been gone from my home city in Canada since moving back here from the United States. 1 year. Off and on the road. I want to do another one because there's so many more stories that I can tell if they come to my memory recall in time in the video length, in the length of footage that I have. Probably wouldn't even be able to get to all the key experiences I've had in a part 2. Need a part 3, a part 4. You can't claim it for me. You can't tell me that I haven't tried to be a morally righteous person. I won't hear it. Well, I'm not going to dismiss discourse in regards to it if you want to try and prove it. But if you can't prove it, and I give you evidence for the fact that I have, the channel, then I'm not going to hear it. I presented my point. I clearly proved you wrong. I'm not going to hear any more about it unless you have something to actually debunk me. That's the difference between just outright dismissal and refusal to engage in argument and actually engaging in a discussion, in an argument, and then putting yourself away from it, from a toxic individual who will just try to manipulate you in said argument to win no matter what, because their fragile egos can't handle it. Their fragile sense of self. Well, then I will dismiss it after that. I think it's provably morally right of me to do. So, I will keep going. And I will die trying. I have compromised on moral stances of mine before, even with the ethical situationalist ideals of mine now that I wish I hadn't have compromised on. There in reality were ways to resolve whatever issue was going on, however minor it may have been, that I could have taken, but for whatever reason I can't recall now, didn't. Well, not anymore. Like, in terms of my job searching plan here, I've had to compromise slightly. But I'm not going any further than I have now. People have offered to, there are people that I know who have offered to pay for an apartment for me just for the winter time. More than happy to pay. There have been people, friends of mine, or a friend of mine who's of the elitist class, who has offered to pay for a hotel for me for the night. And there was a point where there was a doubt in me where I didn't say I would, no, but kind of considered it. I just thought, well, we'll see. Well, no. And I firmly told some of these people no. Mainly because one of them, in terms of paying for an apartment, is of more upper class status, not ultra rich. And the other person was an ultra rich either, but upper middle class. I'm not taking payment from that class status. You may be my friend, but I won't take payment from you in that regard. I don't abide by the existence of your financial class status. I want it dismantled. I won't take from it. And I will not. I've said this in videos before. I will not buy a house. I will not rent an apartment.
And if I was to be charged rent for anywhere that I live, I will not, at least right now, I will not go higher, than $70 a month. Here in Canada, 70 Canadian dollars. I won't. I won't. I will not buy property. Private property. I will not funnel money back to a corrupt landlord for them to shove in their fat pocket. In terms of my pornographic work, if I was ever to do any videos with other creators, or maybe a small business studio, I will not participate in extensive, fine, again, human negotiation, collectivism, but I will not participate in over fetishization of genitalia, of race, ethno-cultural background, of gender. I will not participate in portrayals of such. At the very least, that are overly extensive. If we were making a porno video, if that's the main focus of arousal, I won't participate in it. I will not. It's deplorable. It is over-sexualization to the max. I will never again call the police. Never. The last time I called the authorities was during that time when I was in the village of Crow's Landing, Ontario, living there over the summer, and my motorized bicycle, Timmy, broke down in the middle of nowhere at night, and I thought I was being chased by something. Don't know what it was. That was the last time, and that will be the last time. And any of you out there who claim to be libertarians, leftist libertarians, and leftist anarchists, you're beyond unnecessarily hypocritical if you call the police for anything. It's not a pragmatic method of action. And libertarians, you need to keep, if you believe in the slightest amount of systemic regulation, slight, in a society, you got to keep tabs on how often you ring 911, or depending on whatever your nation is, you need to keep tabs on how many times you call the emergency services for police. Keep tabs on it. It shouldn't be too often if you believe that. And if no one is willing to let me into their homes, no one's willing to help me if I'm bleeding on the sidewalk, if no one's willing to employ me because of my strict but flexible to some degree demands, then I'll die. So be it. I have made enough regrets in my life. I will make more. I know that. And as far as I'm concerned, you should have regrets in life. I'll also talk about this in one of my books, any amount of my writing. I'm so sick and tired of hearing speak about how you should never regret anything in life. You shouldn't have any regrets at all. Live life to the fullest, yada, yada, yada. You shouldn't regret things in life. Yes, you should. Having regrets does not mean, as far as I'm concerned, that you haven't lived a, to some degree, fulfilling life. As far as I'm concerned, if you regret something, that shows me that you've changed as a person. If you actually regret something that you did, you've realized, cognitively, hey, I made a very poor decision. I'm going to try to not do that again. I regret that. I regret my actions for what I did, and I will try to be a better person and not commit that action again. So I'm happy in that regard that I have regrets. I don't like the regrets that I have at all. I've discussed them before. I was a encroaching individual to former friends of mine. I was manipulative. I stood by while a person was kidnapped in Toronto. I've been more harsh on people than when I was younger, should have been. I was much more ignorant when I was younger. All regrets. All of them. Like, I mean it. It's like there's certain terms that people really are. It's because of social alienation. Like, they really are afraid of just using them. When in essence, they mean exactly that. It's what they're describing. They're so afraid of saying them. I will, seeing as it's winter now, I will freeze to death before I compromise any further, extensively. I will. I will die of hypothermia. Oh, I'm so young. So what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I die young. What matters, as far as I'm concerned, is if I die. That's an ageist, that's a manufactured double standard. That's an ageist hypocrisy. Why is it sadder when a young person dies, but it's not as sad when an elderly person dies? I mean it. The second human beings hit their early 20s in this world, all across the world, you're viewed through this predatory, perverse gaze now. There's this, because of sociological trauma causing psychological trauma, there's this cognitive shift that happens in so much of the populace that pre 20 years old, oh, you're so cute, or, oh, well, wow, that's interesting, that's so neat, you have so many ambitions. And then a sprinkling here and there of, oh, why are you doing that? You should know this by now. Oh, but, oh, so many ambitions. You should know this by now. Oh, so many ambitions. You should know this by now. And then right when you're 20, fuck you. You should know this by now. Stop complaining. We all have pain. Grow up. Abuse. Emotional abuse. Ageist abuse. I mean, that shift, I've talked about this in my theories. That dropping of a false persona that many parental figures carry when their children are young, and then slowly, slowly, slowly just making that shift even more to this unempathic personification with no valid explanation. That's what destroys your child emotionally. They don't know why you're doing that. The second that starts, okay, a child reaches 10, you've done that for their whole childhood. The demeaning of their intelligence with the cutesy little voice, and then pretending as if they're these vapid creatures who are just, in their eyes, I guess, just dumb. When you start to just drop that and say, hey, smarten up, the child's going to look at you like this. I mean this metaphorically. What? What do you mean smarten up? Stop doing that, it's stupid. Well, but I've done it for at least 5 years, since I was 5 years old. What's wrong? Shut up! I told you to stop doing it. Okay, I guess. Alright, you're a good child. Okay, but 2 seconds ago you were mad at me. Why did you... That's the internal process that goes on. And when that happens repeatedly, let's bust out my good old diagrams. That disrupts their 5 subconscious desires and their willingness and their motivation consciously. Oh, focus, for God's sake. Oh, you don't want to focus, whatever. I've shown these 1,000 times, it seems. Into apathy. If that's recurrent, disrupt, relay, overactivity to biologic thanatophobia, our innate fear of death. That's what leads to disorders. No, I mean it. When you get past a certain age in this world, because of the trauma endured by so many others, people really do just collectively have this suffer like the rest of us mentality. It's unethical. And you know how I can further prove it's unethical? Because we know there is mounds of proof of individuals who have been able to mitigate and overcome their mental, personality, and behavioral disorders that disrupt their sense of ethics. I'm so tired of the psychiatric community condoning this idea that people will never change in terms of their personality. It's wrong. To say that would basically insinuate that no further conceptual knowledge can be gained once trauma is endured, even with genetic predispositions. We know that so many people have similar genetic predisposures, but they turn out differently in terms of personality psychology, in terms of sociocultural involvement. We know that even with the same amount of similar genetics, it's varied across the board. You are not going to innately become a narcissistic sociopath if you have this specific gene. What makes you more susceptible to that is your environmental surroundings. I am not a biological determinist. I am a situationist psychologically. Maybe even that name should be changed. Basically, what it insinuates is that psychologically, our environmental situations predominantly influence how we emotionally evolve and turn out in our adult lives, rather than these genetic predispositions. I absolutely believe that. There's mounds of proof for that. But maybe a different name for that should be, instead of situationists, well, maybe socio-environmental determinists would be a better naming for the belief. Because I do believe in sociological determinism. However, in that regard, in all of it, I still very much am cosmically an indeterminist. Cosmic indeterminists on a cosmic ontological level.